everybody, and welcome to Chip in a Chair, your one-stop spot for everything poker. Today, I would like to talk with you about the chip in a chair phrase. Where did it come from? Where did it originate? And at the end of this video, I'm going to leave you with two poker tips. One of them is going to be probably the greatest and most important of all. It is the easiest one to say, but it is probably the hardest of all poker tips to implement. But we'll get to that at the end. So in reference to the chip in a chair, I know we've all been there. We've all had our moments where, you know, you've been down to your last couple of chips and you managed to fight back and make a nice profit out of it. I know I've done it. There was a time I was down to $12 that I had to play with and turn that $12 into $500. I sit down with 100, turn it into 1,000. It's crazy how this can work sometimes. But we've all heard different variations of the chip in a chair origin. What I find interesting is that not as many people know what actually happened, and even less know who it's attributed to. So I wanted to change that, and with this first video that I'm putting up on this channel, I wanted to basically pay homage to that individual. The chip in a chair phrase is attributed to Jack Treetop Strauss. Now, he was nicknamed Treetop because he was a tall guy. He was like 6'6", 6'7", somewhere in there, I believe. Pretty tall guy. But Jack Strauss was born in 1930 in Texas. And at a young age, probably I think it was like 6 or 7 years old, his father taught him to play poker, and it stuck with him. He loved the game. And he went on, he graduated high school, went to college, Texas A&M, graduated from there, and became a teacher. And after a few years of doing that, he decided that it wasn't for him. He had decided that he wanted to do something more with poker and gambling, so he left his teaching career and decided to pursue a solid career just in gambling. And he would travel around wherever games were, Oklahoma, Texas, Vegas, wherever they were, he was there, he was gambling. And then when poker found a residency in Vegas, so did Treetop Strauss. So now, let's fast forward to 1982. The 1982 World Series of Poker, there was 104 people that entered, Jack Strauss being one of them, and it was early on in day two. Early on in day two, Strauss decided, with whatever hand he had, we don't know what hand it was, but he pushed all the chips he had in front of him into the middle. Well, he lost. So he got up, and as any decent poker player does, he started cleaning up his area, and when he moved his napkin, he saw that he had one $500 chip left over. Well, because he did not declare himself all in, he actually was permitted to sit back down and play with that chip. It still belonged to him. So he played. And he fought back. He fought the rest of that day, finished out that day, and eventually made it to the final table, where he ended up being heads up with Dewey Tomko. The last hand of that match turned out to be Strauss had ace-10 offsuit, and Dewey Tomko had an ace-4 suited. They both ended up all in pre-flop, and the flop came out with pretty much a little bit of garbage and then a 4. Which was putting Dewey Tomko way ahead. The turn card was inconsequential to Strauss, and it wasn't until the river that the miracle 10 falls, giving Dewey the losing hand of ace-4 with Strauss's ace-10. So really, a pair of 10s won that year. So Strauss went from that $500 chip to winning $540,000 that year, because that was the top prize. So that's where the phrase originated from. He ended up down to one chip and won the event. Now, there's another neat little thing about the 82 World Series, and that is, in 82, Binions received some flack about the bracelets. It was assumed and, I guess, pushed out that, you know, bracelets were too feminine. Men wouldn't wear bracelets. No way, no how. That ain't a thing. They're not manly. So that year, Binion's offered up gold watches. And those watches were even less well received. So in '83, they went back to the bracelets, and it's been bracelets ever since. If you ask me, I think it's cool because I like the bracelets. I think they look better than watches. That's just me. Now, there's another thing about Jack Strauss that I wanted to put out there because he was also attributed with one of the greatest bluffs of all time. Literally, I think, the greatest with how it went down. In a cash game, he was playing against a bunch of people that, were there, and he was on a rush. And you know what happens when you're on a rush and you're playing and you're just catching lightning in a bottle. Every hand you have, you're winning. It's coming your way. And you play it out. You ride it out as best you can until that well dries up, and then you wait for the next one. Well, Treetop decided that no matter what hand he was going to get dealt, he was going to raise. The poker gods decide that they wanted to put him to the test. So what do? The poker gods deal him a 7 deuce. But he raises anyway. And he gets one caller from across the table. And they go to the flop. The flop comes out, 7, 3, 3. Not an overall bad flop for the 7 deuce. Not the greatest flop, but not a bad flop. It had potential. So, again, like any good poker player in that spot, Strauss throws out his continuation bet. And without a surprise from us, his opponent across the table re-raises. Right over top of him. Just throws a whole huge stack out there. Now, at this point, Strauss knew that there's only 2 hands this guy could have. He could either have pocket aces or pocket kings. So the only 2 hands that his opponent could have. That's what he's putting him on. And he knew that he was dominated. But he also knew that with his table image, he could potentially pull off that he has a 3 in his hand, giving him a set of 3s. So he makes the call, and thinking he might be able to steal it on the turn, pending what the turn card is. Well, the turn card comes out, and it's a deuce. Well, now this does nothing for Strauss because that deuce is below those 2 3s that are on the board. So he still has 2 pairs, 7s and 3s, with a deuce. Didn't do much. But Strauss, still determined to win, and still determined to hold on to that bluff, pushes a huge stack out there. Now, his opponent pauses and is thinking whether or not he wants to call. Now, Strauss knew the moment that his opponent did not fold right away that he was not going to fold. There was a very good chance he was going to at least make the call and go to the river. And Strauss knew that if that happened, he was almost surely going to lose the hand because there was almost no chance that he was going to catch the card to win legitimately. See, each card only has a 2.5% chance of coming out. So there's 2 7s and 2 deuces left in the deck. That only is a 10% chance, and that is only if none of those deuces or 7s were dealt out to any of the other players or in the burn pile, which most likely at least one of them is. So he's looking at probably maybe a 4 to 5% chance that he's going to catch what he needs to win. So he had to avoid the call. So what does he do? He tells his opponent that for $25, he will offer up one of his cards and let him see one of his whole cards. So his opponent sits and thinks for a few moments, and then finally decides to take him up on that. Tosses over a $25 chip. Strauss turns over a deuce. Well, his opponent is sitting there thinking for a few minutes longer, and then reasons that the only way Strauss would make that proposition is if both cards were the same. So he was sitting on pocket deuces. He had a full house. This irritated this poker player so much that he ended up folding his hand. What did he fold? Pocket kings. And at that point, Strauss then, after being commended for the hand, turns up the 7 and says it didn't matter which card he chose. Would have had the same effect either way. And he's right. If he had turned up the 7, his opponent would have assumed that he had pocket 7s. He would have never put him on a 7 deuce or anything outside of, a pocket pair. And so that went down as one of the greatest bluffs of all time. Love it. Now, Strauss went on to continue to play poker for the rest of his life, which unfortunately was not as long as we would have hoped. In 1988, he passed away while playing at the bicycle from an aortic aneurysm. Later that year, he was posthumously inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame. Very befitting for him. So now let's talk about those 2 little tips I was telling you about at the beginning. The first tip I wanted to give to you is quite simple. If you're going to go for a bluff, go for it. Okay? If you're going to try to sell somebody on the fact that you're sitting there with those huge, unbeatable nuts, you can't quiver. You can't be sitting there quaking in your boots. You have to sell it. You have to believe it within yourself so that you can make them believe it. Don't give up on it. See, Strauss, when he tried to make that initial, bet on the flop and his opponent piles over top of him, he could have given up. He could have said, well, yep, I already know that I'm beat, so let's just wait for a better spot where I have a little bit more leeway, a little bit more of a push. He didn't. He found a way out of it. And on the turn, when that turn card hit and didn't do anything for him, he could have just simply checked back to his opponent and said, okay, you know what, I'm going to wave a white flag, whatever you're going to do, you're going to do. At that point, there would have been no way for him to win. So he kept the pressure on. He kept that bluff going. He kept it going to the point that his opponent made the only reasonable assumption he could make. He was beat. But he wasn't. So you need to sell that bluff. You can't be intimidated. Okay? You need to make everyone believe that you're not bluffing when you are. And that brings us to the other tip, which, like I said, is the easiest one to say, but the hardest one to follow. It really is. It's the hardest one to continually implement. I still struggle with it sometimes, and I know other professionals that do as well, too. So you're not alone. That particular tip is to keep your head in the game. Now, I talk about this at length in the Power Poker course that'll be coming out later this year. But what I'm referring to with it is don't let a bad beat take you out of the game. See, when Strauss pushed all his chips in the middle and he ended up losing that hand, when he found that $500 chip, he could have very easily just got the case of the fuckets and pissed that $500 away, and nothing would have happened. He wouldn't have won. He would have went off, probably thinking to himself how he could have played better, where he made his mistakes. Maybe did he push too early, too hard, too fast, whatever. And he could have just let that bad beat, or whatever it was, take him out of the game. But he didn't. He held on to it. He held on to the fact that he was determined to win. And he didn't let anything get in his way. Like I said, it's easy to talk about this one. But when you're sitting there at the table, and let's say, for example, you're sitting there with pocket aces, and an ace falls on the board, and you're at a point that you can't lose until that river card falls, and Mr. Joe Jackbutt over here caught that miracle one-outer and crushed your aces, or the hand that he should have never been in on. And now you end up at what Mike Carroll likes to call the threshold of pain, or threshold of misery, I think is what he actually calls it. And what that is that you reach a point that you get so much in your head about the fact that you just lost that you're not focused on the fact that, hey, more times than not, you're going to win in that spot. So this time you didn't. That's not a consistency. But because you get into your head about it, then you start making other bad moves, bad plays, and you just watch whatever you have left in your stack dwindle and dwindle and dwindle down till you're on the felt. Don't be that person. Don't be that player. Remember, the poker cards that are there have no memory, and they have no emotions. They're not out to get you. They fall how they fall. It is what it is. It's not fate. I mean, I guess you could call it fate. Yes, it is definitely luck when somebody catches that little miracle 1 or 2 outer. You know, like, for example, at the '82 World Series, when Strauss caught that 10 on the river. Yeah, there was only 2 cards he could, well, 3 cards he could catch. 3 10s. That was it. And you know what? He caught one of those cards. At which point, based on the 2.5% chance, guess what? That's only a 7.5% chance that he was going to catch one of those 10s. But he caught it. See? So remember, these cards don't choose a winner. They don't choose a loser. You need to understand that. You need to remember that, and you need to not let it get into your head that just because some idiot played a hand they shouldn't have played, or the cards didn't fall the way you would have wanted them to fall. Okay? Keep your head in the game. Don't give up just because you've got a bad beat. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen again and again. It's just the nature of the game. Be prepared for it. Don't let it destroy you. Because remember, if you have a chip and you have a chair, you have a chance.